Yeah, go ahead. I'm silenced while I type. Go ahead.
This is the book. It has no peer. You better believe it and drink no beer. This is the book. David Wood disagrees, but the stones will affirm it, and so will the trees. This week in Jihad, ladies and gentlemen, starts with a surah like it. Now, you all know the Quran challenge. You have to have a surah like it to show that the Quran is not from Allah. So there's a surah like it right there. This is the book. It has no peer. You better believe in it and drink no beer. This is the book. David Wood disagrees, but the stones will affirm it, and so will the trees. That, of course, being a reference to the trees crying out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him," which is not in the Quran, but is in the Hadith. You can read all about it in the upcoming Muhammad, a Critical Biography, which is available for pre-order now at Amazon. But what do you think, David? We have with us the great David Wood. Was that a surah like it? You be the judge.
Uh, I have to say that's more powerful than any surah in the Quran. So I'm your witness. Isn't that wild? By the way, that contest. If you don't believe that this is the word of God, then produce a surah like it. And you produce a surah like it, and then Muslims go, "Oh, but we're the judges, and we say it's not good enough." It's like, well, why is this a challenge for unbelievers? Then you guys are making yourselves the judges.
Yeah, they can never lose. That's why it's such a great challenge. But you know, the funny thing about all of these tactics is that they are coming out. They are becoming known in a way that they never were before. And I've got another one. I think maybe let's lead off with that this week, David. We have an imam from California, from the land of fruits and nuts, and he is praising the protests all over the country, the colleges and universities all over the country protesting in favor of Hamas. And he is saying that the protesters ought to put fear in the hearts of the Zionists and the supporters of Israel. Every ounce of fear that you put in your hearts, in their hearts, by your lawful protests, he says, will be blessed by Allah. He says this is it. Indeed, Allah loves those who fight in his cause, in battle array, as though they were a solid structure. That's the Quran. And then the Imam goes on, Tarikatah, this guy is. Allah loves those who fight for a cause side by side in order to please Allah. And he goes on, but he ends up with this. I remind you that every step you take for the sake of Allah in this cause will get you rewards. That every ounce of fear and anger that you put in the heart of Netanyahu and his thugs, and all those who support, collaborate, and finance this violent and inhumane war against a primarily civilian population, every ounce of fear that you put in their hearts by your lawful protests is rewarded by Allah. As the Quran says, whenever they step into a place which infuriates the infidels, and whenever they make a gain from an enemy, a good deed is recorded for them. That is chapter 9, verse 120. So what do you think, David? What's the deal with this fear business? Why would they want to put fear in the hearts of the enemies of Allah?
You know what that just reminded me of? It reminded me of, you might actually remember the article. There was an article. It was a little after the 9/11 attacks, but it was called Jihad Comes to Small Town USA back in the day. I remember sharing that article. It was about a woman. So this was after the September 11th attacks, way back in the day. And she's a reporter, and the local mosque was having an event to show that Islam condemns terrorism and violence and that these things have nothing to do with Islam. Now, they had an Arabic meeting beforehand, just a little like discussion group and so on. She's a reporter, white Western reporter, and she shows up early while they're still having their little
I
meeting
do
in
remember
Arabic.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and she gets there early, and they say, "Oh, the English meeting hasn't started." And she's like, "Well, I don't want to sit in my car," and so on. They say, "Okay, you can just sit down." This woman spoke fluent Arabic. She didn't let them know that. This woman knew fluent Arabic. This white Western woman knew fluent Arabic, and she was listening to them. And they were the discussion that was going on while they were speaking Arabic was all about how to terrorize people, not through terrorist attacks, but just how to they were saying, they're saying yes, and they're all telling stories. And yes, when I went on the plane, I kept jumping up and then going to the bathroom and then coming back out and then going back in and then coming back out and so on. They kept talking about how all these things that they were doing just to freak people out. And so they're all telling stories about all the things they're doing to make people extremely uncomfortable, but not anything where you can point to and say, oh, this person did something illegal. And then eventually the English meeting started, and it was all about how, oh, this is a tiny minority of extremists that have nothing to do with Islam. Oh, it's not a representative. There's just a misunderstanding of our religion and so on. And anyway, they screwed up and they posted that. But yeah, there is something built into Islam. Maybe it's Muhammad who said he's been made victorious with terror. So you say, hey, Muhammad, how'd you become so successful in Arabia? I've been made victorious with terror, just constantly terrifying people. It makes them constantly uncomfortable, and the goal is to make them so uncomfortable that one, you don't want to talk about it because you're worried about violence against you, but you become so uncomfortable that over time, the only way to get rid of that discomfort is to convert. And so it's a way of silencing critics, and it's a way of, over time, getting people to convert.
Absolutely. Also, I think it's important to bear in mind that it is not just about making people afraid in the sense of terror attacks or the possibility of terror attacks, although that's very much a part of it. But what you're saying is very important, that it's just designed to terrify people on an ordinary daily basis, keep you off balance, and ultimately make you on the defensive and more susceptible to their claims about Islam and all the rest of it. And I see that, thinking back, what this reminded me of, what this California imam reminded me of, actually, David, was your debate with Muhammad Hijab. And how beforehand you were talking to him and you stuck out your hand to shake his hand and he refused to shake your hand. And I thought, this is a classic example. He's not so much trying to make you afraid, but just kind of intimidated, off balance, on the defensive, putting it in your mind, or trying to, that you've done something terribly wrong, so that he doesn't even have to give you the basic courtesies that one human being gives to another.
Yeah, the other thing that jumped out is listening to what that guy was saying about putting people in fear and so on. It's just, I can't get away from the idea. Me and AP talk about this a lot, just like how pathetic it is, right? You've got the Ummah. You've got 49 Muslim majority countries. You've got the Ummah for 14 centuries expanding. They have like a quarter of the world's population in 49 countries. And they're completely powerless against this group of a couple million Jews that they think is absolutely running the world. It's like, wait a minute, you have a quarter of the world's population, you're completely powerless against this group? Whose side do you think God's on if this little group can completely overpower your entire ummah and your God and everything else? Like they're that powerful? They're seriously that powerful? And it's just interesting because, I mean, since October 7th, they've just endless, I mean, even before that, but especially since the October 7th attack, there's just endless whining and going on shows and going on podcasts and complaining on Piers Morgan and they seem to think that that if they just whine enough and if they align themselves with enough Marxists and socialists and anarchists and neo-Nazis and the LGBTQ community, and they just throw tantrum after tantrum after tantrum and set up tents on college campuses, somehow they're going to overpower Israel and stop all of this. You're just looking at it and saying, like, this is the best you can come up with, guys. This is the master plan of the Ummah, whining and throwing tantrums, rolling around on the floor like a kid in a Walmart checkout line freaking out because his mom won't buy him Skittles. We're gonna win. We're gonna win. We're gonna. And it's so pathetic. I mean, to me, the whole thing just looks pathetic. Like, seriously,
Yeah.
you 2 billion people versus a couple million Jews, and you guys look like a complete joke, and you go around whining on whining on everywhere else in the world, completely powerless, weak.
Well, I think that's the flip side of the strategy, that you're supposed to strike fear in the enemies of Allah. And so that involves a lot of intimidation, a lot of insults, and the kind of attacks that we see generally in that debates with Muslims involve. And then on the other side, if that doesn't work, as it doesn't work as a society with Israel, then the flip side is to turn on the weak act and claim that you are being victimized, and then you can prey upon the contemporary West's obsession with victimhood and manipulate people that way. So it's either you're trying to intimidate people into submission, or you're trying to manipulate them into submission, but it's always submission as the goal. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, while the imam in California is talking about how great it is that you are making the infidels afraid at these protests, we had a guy in Scotland try to do it in another way. There he is chasing a cop with a chainsaw. And I think, David, we got to give this man credit for innovation, for bidah, even though bidah, innovation, is forbidden in Islam. People say all the time that Islam... Wait a minute, how did that happen?
You put up a jazz
Yeah,
picture,
that's
man.
Pharaoh Sanders, but how did he get there?
You clicked on it by accident.
Well, it says if I hit finish, though, will it end the show? Yeah, I don't want to end the show. How did this happen?
What did you do? Robert, I specifically told you to watch the tutorials on Ecamm.
I don't understand how this happened. I was going for the chainsaw, and I was just moving the chainsaw picture over, and now suddenly it's Pharaoh Sanders on the screen.
You see, the curse of Allah upon you.
Okay, that's my screensaver, and there we are on the corner.
Yeah,
now, how
click
do I get
on
us back?
Click
that's
on the
John
little
Coltrane, ladies and gentlemen, on the left. What's that now?
Yeah, click on the little like camera icon. It should be on your screen. Like, I don't even see what you're...
Okay, it says entire screen. No, I don't want that. Camera icon. Let's see. Oh, there we are.
There you go.
Woo.
See?
I've completely lost the thread now. The chainsaw. Oh,
yeah. So no, that is. By the way, yeah. I just want to say that is a button, just for future reference. If you want to share your screen, whatever's going on your computer, there's a button that looks like a computer screen. You click on that, and it shares your screen.
Oh, I must have hit that by
looks
mistake.
like a camera. Yeah. Then there's a camera button that's to share whatever your cameras are looking at.
Wow. Okay. Anyway, he doesn't have a sword. There's no verse of the chainsaw in the Quran. There is a verse of the sword.
There would have been. There would have been if they had existed. If chainsaws had existed during the time of Muhammad, there would be the verse of the chainsaw.
I love that. That might have to be the next week's poem. Actually, 2 weeks, because I'm supposed to speak in UCLA next week. Yeah, but a Surah like it, the verse of the chainsaw. It could be epic. You could send in some entries for the verse of the chainsaw, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
So that dude's running. That dude's running around like Leatherface, challenging everybody. That's good.
Yeah, he was, of course. What do you think he was yelling? I know, top one.
Trying to think of no. Yeah, I was about to think, what did Leatherface say in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but he didn't say anything. So I'll just go with Allahu Akbar then.
Yeah, I remember him, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, them getting mad about something that I don't, probably better not to get into it. But in any case, I did think of the Quranic Chainsaw Massacre, the Mecca Chainsaw Massacre, whatever.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that could be the name of the show, Mecca Chainsaw Massacre Edition or something like that. Or
oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. The Mecca Chainsaw Massacre edition. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're watching now. Okay, we have another Islamic principle summed up in an audio out of Gaza where, contrary to all the claims, Israel is actually trying to evacuate the civilians out of Rafah, the last stronghold of Hamas in Gaza. And oh, David, can we deal with this? Why is there no super chat on this channel?
yeah, Robert's channel, because he talks about jihad constantly, is not available for monetization because it's all about jihad, and for some reason it's wrong and immoral to criticize jihad. So he's not available for monetization. Although you can still support Roberts. He has a Patreon link in the description box, and also he has about 1 million books that he's written. So out of all the books that Robert's written, you can look through the titles on like Amazon and see which you're most interested in. I would say totally essential reading. You need, of course, his book, The History of Jihad. The History of Jihad. Tons of information. Even if you've been studying Islam for years, most of the information in that book is going to be new information. You definitely need the critical Quran. Given what's going on in Israel, you need what's called the Palestinian delusion.
That's it.
Yeah, the Palestinian delusion. Yeah, and then other than that, I mean, he has dozens of books. Other than that, like pick any topics you're interested in. But everyone needs those.
Much appreciated. And yes, any support you can give us at this point to help us keep going be greatly appreciated. We have fallen on some hard times in that regard, and want to keep doing what we're doing, but need your help. Anyway, back to Gaza and Israel. The IDF actually calls people up and tells them to evacuate. And so there was this dialogue with an IDF soldier talking to this guy in Gaza, and he says, you need to evacuate for your own safety. And the Gaza resident says, we want to die. And the IDF officer says, you need to leave. The blast radius will be immense and it will affect you. And the Gazan says, we aren't leaving. Kill the children. He goes on, and the IDF officer, I think, makes a mistake. He tries to convince him on the basis of the Quran, and says the Quran doesn't want you to act in this way. You know, there's so many non-Muslims all over the place telling Muslims that Islam is really a religion of peace. And this was just another. But the Gazan said, oh, you know the Quran? Well, you're cursed in the Quran. So he wasn't buying any of it. And then he went on to say all the business about we love death more than you love life. And so the Jews...
Can you imagine an IDF soldier trying a crash course in one of these Islamic de-radicalization programs, trying to give the speedy version? No, peace and tolerance, man. You want to live. Islam's not about dying and all this stuff. And then, not buying that. Because, I mean, Robert, we know what the Quran says, and we know all the hadiths where people ask Muhammad, what's the greatest thing in the world? And you have Muhammad saying, by Allah, I would love to be martyred in Allah's cause, and then come back to life, and then get martyred again, and then come back to life again, and then get martyred again, and then come back to life again, and then get martyred again. He says, I just want to die, and then come back and die again, and come back and die again, and come back and die. And it's like there's an obsession with martyrdom. And then, lots of Muslims in the world don't know much about it. They don't read those sources. But in an area like Palestine, Hamas and the Palestinians Children's TV network and all this stuff, they raise kids their entire lives to be familiar with these passages where the greatest thing in the world is dying for Allah while fighting the unbelievers. It's the greatest thing. It gets you the greatest reward. You have the Bible, you have the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians saying, these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. What's the greatest thing in the world according to the Apostle Paul? Love. What's the greatest thing in the world according to Muhammad? Dying for Allah. And so they try to, a quick little phone call isn't going to undo the all the brainwashing that people there have been subjected to all their lives.
Indeed.
But I mean, think about that. It's like the IDF are trying their hardest to save the lives, and the people on the other end, no, we want to die, and we want our kids to die. We all want to die.
That's it. That's exactly what they're taught. And then people don't understand this or don't know this. They pretend that that's not what they're taught. They blame the Israelis and so on. This is just the way that it always is. Somebody's saying, I looked and couldn't find the audio clip that we're talking about. You can find it at jihadwatch.org. All these stories are always taken straight from jihadwatch.org, so you can go over there, do a search, you will find it, you will find the audio. Okay, David, we have out of Jerusalem some very interesting news. Last week, we were talking about a Turk, a tourist, who went to Jerusalem supposedly on a tourist trip and then ended up stabbing an Israeli cop while he was there. And this week, it turns out that that Turkish tourist was an imam. Now, I just wondered, how is it that an imam who is dedicating his whole life to understanding the religion of peace properly, how did he get it so wrong that he thought that it had to do with attacking unbelievers?
That is weird, Robert, because, I mean, after all of the literally tens of thousands of terrorist attacks that we've seen over the years, just since 9/11, we're told after everyone, nope, it's just a misunderstanding of Islam. And we've always wondered, how do so many people misunderstand Islam in exactly the same way? So weird, so confusing. And then, but you assume, okay, maybe there's just this real big problem of people being completely ignorant of the religion, and they all conclude, because of their ignorance, that they all have to go fight and kill people for Allah. But then you have like imams and so on. So I don't know. It's just one of life's great mysteries, Robert.
Indeed, it is. Here's another. This is the interior of the Kora Church in Turkey, in Constantinople, Istanbul, occupied Constantinople. And you can see there in the photo one of the holy icons being covered over with a panel because the church this week was converted back into a mosque. It was a church, of course, up until 1453 when Constantinople fell to the Ottoman jihadis. Then it was converted to a mosque the first time, made into a museum in the 20th century, and then reconverted to a mosque just this week. Now, there are plenty of mosques all over Turkey as it is. Why did they need this one, David? What's the idea of taking the sacred site, a sacred site of Christians, and making it into a mosque?
Well, Islam's been doing that since the beginning. I mean, the Kaaba was a center of pagan worship. Taking over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That was so think about this. They took over the site that was dearest to the people of Mecca and the surrounding inhabitants. They had to have it for themselves to control it. They have to take over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And of course, the Hagia Sophia, and it was just a few years ago that they turned that back into a mosque after it became more of a museum. But they wanted to flex on the world, even though there's a giant mosque, like a couple-minute walk from there. They didn't need another mosque. They didn't need the space. That was to show the world that Islam is on the move and we're being strong again and so on. And so, yeah, that's just it's a show of strength to say, hey, here's your place of worship, and we've turned it into a mosque. We even see that in the West. Muslims love taking some church that no one's using anymore. A place sells a church, they love buying it, and saying, no, we turned another church into a mosque, and so on. It's a show of strength, and all I want to do is say to all you Hindus out there who had to listen to complaints over the Babri mosques, the Babri Masjid, now that's has a Hindu temple over it, because there was at some point that was a Hindu site before Muslims built the Babri Masjid over top of it to show their strength and to show how strong they were. And then Hindus came back and said, nope, not so fast. We're actually stronger than you now. And so here's what we're going to do. And Muslims around the world throw tantrums. Oh, it's so intolerant, so evil, so wicked. How dare you? You see what they do. They're a bunch of hypocrites. So talking to all you Hindus out there, you have your actual example of what Muslims believe. They believe that if you're strong enough, if you're powerful enough, if you've got the guts to take over someone else's place of worship and convert it to your own, you should do that. That's all I'll say.
That's it. It's a sign of the victory of Islam and the superiority of Islam over the non-Muslim religions. And so they especially want to build mosques over synagogues, churches, Hindu temples, either convert the building itself or destroy the building and build the mosque over it. They would prefer to do that than have a fresh mosque in a new place, because that shows that Islam has defeated the infidels. And so it's really all about what that California imam was saying that we talked about earlier. Striking fear in the enemies of Allah. Striking fear in the enemies of Allah. What better way to do that than to say, see, look, your community is shrinking and defeated, and ours is triumphant and growing, and we're taking over your own holy places. So they've done it all over the world.
Yeah, and I'll just add one extra thought. Israel. Hey, Israel. You know, these you let these guys continue to have control of the Temple Mount, even though it is the holiest site for Jews, and lots of Jews don't want the Temple Mount. They believe that the Messiah is going to deal with that sort of thing, and so there isn't much of a desire to go and take it. All I want to say is, if you did happen to take the Temple Mount at some point, yes, there would be lots of complaining, but all of that complaining would be utter, total hypocrisy. Islam has spent its entire existence taking over people's holy sites. So, just for future reference.
That's it, man. You nailed it. That is absolutely true. And I want to commend you especially today, David, for speaking the truth, because speaking the truth is getting more and more dangerous in this world. This is a German politician named Marie-Therese Kaiser. What better name for a German politician than Kaiser?
The only one would be Führer.
Yeah, Marie-Therese Führer. No, this is Marie-Therese Kaiser. And she is a politician with Alternative for Germany, which is indeed the alternative political party in Germany that is trying to limit mass Muslim migration into the country. And Marie-Therese Kaiser was actually convicted of a crime this week. She was convicted of inciting hatred and ordered to pay a fine of 6,000 euros, which is about, I think, $6,500 or $7,000. And she's being charged 60 euros a day for 100 days. She will also have a criminal record. And this is because the rape statistics heavily show that the mass number of rapists, the largest group of rapists, are Afghan Muslim migrants in Germany who see all those German women and think, oh, the captives of the right hand. They think they can rape them with impunity, as we saw with the Muslim rape gangs in Britain. And so she got news that a lot of Afghan migrants were going to be moved into her district, and she published the gang rape statistics that showed that Afghan Muslim migrants were heavily involved in gang rapes. And now she's been convicted of inciting hatred against Afghans and fined €6,000. What do you think?
It actually reminds me of Tommy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
So for years, politicians and journalists and social workers, judges, prosecutors, they wouldn't go near these grooming gangs in the UK because they were worried about being called Islamophobes. And it was actually it was people like Tommy Robinson who kept shouting it from the rooftops until people finally caught on. And that's when police were basically forced and prosecutors were forced because of public embarrassment to actually start going after some of these rape gangs that they'd been ignoring for years because they refused. It's more you would rather let this gang of men rape 12-year-old girl after 12-year-old girl after 12-year-old girl, drug them, rape them, gang rape them, and start pimping them. You would rather do that than be called a name like Islamophobe or something. But then even, you remember Tommy went to one of the trials, and all he did was he was standing outside and he read a BBC article on this. So he wasn't giving any new information. He wasn't giving any trial details or anything. He sat there and read a BBC article about the gang, and they sent him to prison. They locked him up and sent him to prison over that. And so what's he doing? What is the big thing? He's exposing something they don't want exposed. And so we're just going to punish people for telling the truth. He didn't say anything that's false. They punished him for telling the truth and embarrassing them. And so it looks like this woman's the German example of that. It's good she just got fined and didn't get prison time for reporting on the rape epidemic in Germany.
Yeah, you never know. That could be coming. It looks as if the people in power are just doubling down as the truth gets more obvious and harder to ignore. They're not saying, hey, you guys were right all along. They're saying, okay, you're going to be fined, you're going to be tried, Tommy's going back to jail, whatever. He's still got legal troubles all the time. They keep arresting him. Practically every time I go over to Twitter or X, I see, oh, Tommy's been arrested again. It's incredible. Meanwhile, I think there is a big change going on in Britain. Perhaps the movement from the first stage of Jihad to the second, but they are much more open, as we've discussed in many contexts, David, much more open about what they're about. You probably saw this gentleman. This is Motin Ali, who was just elected a councillor in
Nice.
Bradford, Leeds.
What could go wrong?
And when he was elected, when he's celebrating his victory, this is from this picture, he's screaming Allahu Akbar and saying this is for Gaza. And talking about how good his victory is going to be for Gaza. He doesn't say anything about how good it's going to be for the English, who he's supposed to be representing. Now, David, there was a bit of an outcry about this fellow. And actually the Green Party that he's part of, because you know how environmentally conscious the Muslims in there and the jihadis are. But anyway, Motin Ali has been subject to an investigation by the Green Party, and they're going to look into his election night shenanigans. But what do you think he responded when that came out?
Criticisms of him?
Yeah, that they're going to look into why he's.
I would guess some version of Islamophobia.
You are correct, sir. You win $500. Yes, $500 in Confederate money is going to you because Mr. Ali, he immediately charged those who had a problem with his screaming Allahu Akbar and saying his victory was for Gaza. He immediately charged them with Islamophobia.
Shocking.
That is absolutely what it was all about. And the same thing happened in Australia. I believe we talked last week about the Muslim teen who stabbed a random passerby in Perth, Australia, on the west coast. And the Imam of Perth's largest mosque, the Nasir Mosque, Imam Syed Wadud Janud, said this was particularly upsetting. And he said, we condemn any act of violence which is committed in our name, in the name of our religion. Our religion literally means peace. We're extremely concerned about Islamophobia.
Yeah, that's weird. So apparently you could just change the meaning of the word Islam to anything you want and say that it means this. And then, but my goodness, any act of violence carried out in the name of your religion, you got a lot of condemning to do, 14 centuries of it, going back to your prophet.
Yeah, he's going to be busy. Old
For some
Wadud.
reason, I don't think he really believes what he's saying, Robert, and that it's just a show because
Oh,
people are
surely
watching.
not. Oh, David, why?
Isn't that weird?
You can't be serious.
It's just funny. It's just funny that because they never have a plan B, now they just, oh, darn, people are catching on to what's going on around here. What are we going to do? I know. Let's use our Dawa script from 2008. Islam just means peace. It's like they never come up with anything new. It's always like the same.
Yeah, you'd think that they would have cut that one out. I mean, people know, that Islam doesn't mean peace. Islam means submission, ladies and gentlemen.
Islam means submission, ladies and gentlemen, not peace. If Islam meant peace, it would be salam, not Islam.
That's it.
But the words kind of sound the same, so it means the same thing.
Like Hussein Salami, the Islamic
well, like salami. Oh, see,
Yeah.
Islam means a delicious meat because it sounds like salami. So
It's
we'll
the
just say
lunch
it's the
meat of
same
peace.
thing. It's the lunch meat of peace and tolerance. Pay no attention to the jihadi standing behind the curtain.
That's it. All right. I guess we should do these stories out of Nigeria. Terrible succession of stories, David. I'll just go through them quickly. In Enugu State, Fulani herdsmen, who are, of course, Islamic jihadis trying to establish a caliphate, murdered at least 6 Christians, including children. In Kaduna State, they ambushed and murdered a Christian pastor. In, let's see, I don't know what state this happened in. I was going to name all the different states of Nigeria to show that this is going on all over the country, but this one does not say where it happened, but it says that, according to International Christian Concern, a Christian was falsely imprisoned and forced to convert to Islam as a condition of being reunited with his family. In Plateau State, there were 30 Christians murdered, including a mother and her baby. What's going on in Nigeria, David?
Well, Nigeria is the worst place in the world right now as far as persecution of Christians. I mean, you can do a ranking in different ways based on different criteria, but just in terms of people being killed for not believing in Islam, Nigeria is the worst place in the world to be right now. But I have to say, the only comforting thing about all of the endless jihad we've mentioned this before. You could do This Week in Jihad just about Nigeria because it's endless. It's endless and it's relentless. We could do this show every week, week in, week out, and just do the entire show about all the jihad going on in Nigeria. So it's really, really bad there. The only sort of silver lining to the cloud is all the students on college campuses in tents protesting the genocide that's occurring in Nigeria right now. Oh wait, there's not one. There's not one.
So heartwarming.
There's not one because Christian lives don't matter, Nigerian lives don't matter to them.
That's right. It's really all about just expressing Islamic anti-Semitism and leftist anti-Semitism, and that's why they're all upset about a non-existent genocide in Gaza and not
Oh yeah,
about a
yeah,
real one in Nigeria.
yeah. Matter of fact, that's the third thing. So why don't you have protests about this? Because African lives don't matter to them, Christian lives don't matter to them, and there are no Jews involved.
Indeed. So
You almost wish, Robert, that some Jews would go down there in Nigeria so that students might actually pay attention to what's going on.
yes, if they could get the Fulani herdsmen to uh, claim that they're Jews or to bring some Jews in, then they could.
Let's send in some black Hebrew Israelites, tell these guys that they're the real Jews, then they can proclaim themselves the real Jews, and then maybe we'll get some attention there.
Yep, yep. If they can blame the Jews, it'll be big. But also, it's worth repeating, David, what you've said in the past, that Nigeria is at a fault line. That there, wherever the border between a majority Muslim area and a majority non-Muslim, particularly Christian area, there is conflict. And what is the goal? What are they trying to do?
They're trying to push the line, and they're relentless. They don't care if it takes months, years, centuries, whatever. So, guys, there's again, little recap. Nigeria, there's a reason the jihad there is endless and relentless. It's one of the most important spots in the world. We tend to think, oh, no, the only thing that matters is what's in the United States and over here and so on. No, you have certain spots that are on the dividing line. Islam dominated on this side and not on that side. And there's like a line. Nigeria, there's a line that runs right through Nigeria. Muslim majority on this side, Christian majority on that side. What do they want to do? They want to keep pushing the line further and further south until Christianity is completely wiped out of Nigeria. And then what? Are they going to stop there? No, they want to keep pushing it down and take over all of Africa. And again, doesn't matter if it takes months, years, centuries, whatever. They just keep going.
And it's important to remember that's exactly how the Islamic world as we know it was created. That there was, if you went back, if you look in the history of jihad, if you study what happened for the conquest of Egypt, the conquest of Syria, of Persia, and so on and on and on, you see exactly this kind of thing happening. The non-Muslims terrorized, the non-Muslims massacred, the non-Muslims driven out of various towns and cities, and ultimately the whole area becomes Islamic. And now it's just taken for granted. Meanwhile, we have, let's dip back into the West's fantasy version of Islam. Did you see this?
No. What's she playing? Dodgeball? What is that?
She is actually playing basketball.
Oh,
And I should have learned how to do videos because it's the most ludicrous video you ever saw. And ladies and gentlemen, you can see this video at Jihad Watch like the others. But this is an advertisement for Google Pixel, which is, I don't know, some photo site or some photo app or something like that. Anyway, the ad, the video is 3 Muslim women in full abaya with hijab, and they are playing basketball. And as they play basketball, they take pictures of themselves, apparently with Google Pixel. And then they get together, and they're little United Nations. They're all 3 different races, 3 different colors, but they're all Muslim women. And they compare. They're looking through their photos and talking about their basketball acumen. It's a phone, people are saying. Okay, so anyway, they're taking pictures on it and looking at the pictures. So,
yeah.
what is the deal? Have you seen? Yeah.
I just wanted to point out, Robert, because you and me are we're a little older than the younger generation, so we're not always in on all the lingo. But based on what I've seen, this is what the younger generation refers to as cringe. They call this cringe. They would call this cringe.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
And yes, I was just wondering though, have you ever seen Muslim women in full abaya playing basketball?
Yeah. Because because I mean, you can look there. It looks like, gosh, it looks exactly like the Bronx where I used to live. But yeah, every time I went down to the old basketball court to shoot some hoops, play a little b-ball, it was always women out there in full Islamic garb.
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
just, I don't know. I never saw it. I lived in
well,
the
well,
Bronx.
Robert, if they're dressed like ninjas, you're not going to see them. Come on.
Oh, well, you got a point there. But Google, of course, is trying to normalize this, trying to make us think, well, in the first place, these people are just like us. And of course, they are just like us. They just have this violent, expansionist, aggressive, supremacist ideology. And the idea is to intimidate us here again into thinking, well, we have to accept this or we're racist and Islamophobic. But it's really kind of ludicrous because there just aren't a whole lot of women dressed that way playing basketball. I
Yeah,
remember,
in all, oh, I just want to point out, in all seriousness, I've never
yeah,
seen that before. I've never seen that on any basketball court ever
indeed.
in my life. I'm sure it's happened, but for them to, oh look, isn't this great? And it's clearly just staged.
Yeah. And there was one a few months ago. I think we talked about it, but I know I certainly had it at Jihad Watch where they were, it was the same kind of thing. These Muslim women in the full garment, and they're hiking and kayaking and things like that, and they're trying to sell outdoor gear to Muslims. And I think that's just another thing I've never seen. I don't know. Maybe it happens in Britain or something. I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't happen as a rule. This is more social engineering than trying to reflect the proclivities or interests of an actual group that they're trying to sell to. And of course, much advertising nowadays is indeed social engineering. But do you think that if a lot of Muslim women start taking up basketball, that there'll be less jihad?
Yeah, because they won't, they'll be too busy playing basketball.
That's it. It's
And
really
people will
very
say, people will
simple.
say, people will say, hey, we're going to go slaughter these unbelievers in the name of Allah. You want to join us? No, I got a 3-on-3 game.
Yeah, it's time for hoop. All right, in Germany, a confused man who turned out to be a 30-year-old Syrian. He started walking around in a kindergarten with a knife in his hand.
Looking for a bride.
Well,
Who wants to marry me? Who wants to marry Abdullah today, kids?
I was going to ask what's the knife for, but I shudder to think. Anyway,
It's the dowry. This is my great grandmother's knife, and I give it to whoever my new bride is in this kindergarten.
that's a beautiful thing. That's really heartwarming. In Pakistan, a Christian girl, 16 years old, a little old really for this sort of thing, but she was abducted and raped at gunpoint on Easter Sunday. And that was, of course, by a Muslim who ordinarily would marry her in this kind of case because the idea is that that's the way that the girl can escape shame and disgrace and dishonor. So he gets a bride. She, of course, has to live with the rapist. It's not quite a even give and take here.
No, someone needs to make like these rom-coms, these romantic comedies. They need to make the Islamic version.
But maybe that's your next movie, your
Hmm.
next series. I know
I
you
bet, I
probably.
bet, I bet Pakistan that would like be the all-time highest grossing film ever in Pakistan if it was a rom-com about a Muslim who kidnaps a 12-year-old girl and then they live happily ever after. It would be like the so it's win like 37, I don't know what their awards over there, the Screaming Goat Award or something like that. They'd win it. Here. And the next award for greatest film goes to The forced marriage! Yay!
That's a beautiful thing. All right, this is Humayun Kabir. And Humayun Kabir is a politician in India. And he is a Muslim. And so, as we all know, David, Muslims in India are a terrorized and deeply traumatized minority community in fear of an impending genocide. But in real life,
victims. They're victims everywhere.
Yes.
They're the minority. They're horribly oppressed victims, and that's why you have to
Precisely.
hand over society. That's why you have to hand over society to them.
So he's running for office. This guy, he's running for office. He's a politician, and he's making a speech. And in the speech, he says this: "I will leave politics if I don't drown you people," he's talking to Hindus, "in the Bhagirathi River within 2 hours. You are 30% people. We are 70% here. If you think that you will demolish the Mosque of Kazipada and the rest of the Muslims will sit back and relax, this will never happen." So, we have some pretty weird politicians in the United States, but I never heard of one say, "I'm going to drown all you people in the river."
I have to say that kind of sounded like a challenge, didn't it?
A challenge.
Like a challenge about that mosque. Like, I dare you.
Oh, yeah.
I triple dog dare you Hindus to do something about this mosque. Thank you.
Because
You think you could get away with this?
There's a movement in India because so many mosques were built where they demolished Hindu temples and built the mosque over them. Now a lot of Hindus are saying, hey, these mosques should be demolished and the temples restored. And so people are suggesting this, and the Muslim community is getting very, very angry about it.
Well, I have to say, Robert, I mean, if we know anything from Islam, it's that it's wrong and immoral to take over someone's holy site. And hey, wait a minute. Come to think of it, they love doing that in Islam. And who are Hindus to break that pattern? So Hindus, if Muslims really think it's a great, wonderful thing to do once you're strong enough, what's the example set by Islam? If you're strong enough, then you take over the other group's religious site and you make it your own. That's the example they set when they were stronger than you. So Hindus, now you're stronger than them. What are you going to do?
There you go. Oh my goodness. I had some Nigeria stories in the wrong place. There's one where they raided 9 Christian villages. 3 people murdered in a region where now 1.4 million people have been displaced. So that's exactly what we were talking about before, David, that they're trying to drive the Christians out and Islamize the whole area.
And by the way, when we're talking about that and talking about kind of the dividing line, what are the areas that are those areas are very important? I mean, India is another area where you have
Yes.
like Muslim-dominated areas of India, then a kind of line, and then Hindu-dominated area south of that. And what are Muslims trying to do? They're just constantly trying to push south.
Exactly. So we have out of Britain, this was an interesting video. Did you see this one, David? This woman in the
Nope.
video, a Muslim woman wearing hijab, and she's obviously standing in front of a church. There's a statue of Mary, and she is throwing rocks.
No, Muslims respect Mary and places of worship.
She is throwing rocks at the church and apparently at the statue of Mary.
Wait a minute, Robert. Isn't Mary the only woman who's actually mentioned by name in the entire Quran?
Well, I'm not sure, because there's that passage where it's talking about Miriam, who is the sister of Aaron
Oh, yeah.
and Moses, and conflating her with Mary, the mother of Jesus, since they're both Maryam in Arabic. But obviously Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses, is a different lady.
But they still say that's all just referring to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and that this was just some sort of completely unknown literary device where you refer to a respected woman as a different respected woman with the same name and refer to her as the sister of this other guy and the daughter of that guy's father. Anyway, yeah, they tell me it's a practice, and that's what reconciles the passages. But they've never been able to come up with the slightest bit of evidence or one other example of it ever.
Yes, that's the only time that this common expression was ever used. So I guess it would be like if I called you, oh, brother of Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
And only it really turned out that I was just getting your identity all mixed up with somebody else entirely. But anyway,
yeah, or if it's a future generation, they find out my name is David, and they're like, "Oh, David, husband of Bathsheba and father of Solomon," and we start talking about, wait a minute, that's a different David. And you go, "Oh, yeah, but it's just using this as a title of honor and respect by calling you by the same names that are associated with that other David who's thousands of years before you."
It's a great honor and respect to mix you up with somebody else, David.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The highest honor.
So in the midst of these stories from Britain that we have covered, the Mecca chainsaw massacre, the victory in Bradford with the Allahu Akbaring politician, the lady in the same town throwing rocks at the church and the statue, we had our friend Mo Hijab doing a victory lap.
Woohoo!
And I am sure you saw this. He tweeted, "It is clear that elements of the right in the UK are embittered at the rising population of Muslim and or ethnic communities in major cities." And of course that's not true at all. Nobody's worried about the other ones. Let's be real. If you're waiting for a policy or party that will remove 1.4 million Muslims, British citizens from London, or 350,000 Muslims from Birmingham, such a policy will probably never come. He's right about that. Practically speaking, you can solve your problem by going to other towns and cities with less Muslims or ethnics. 93% of the country is non-Muslim. If you can't tolerate us, you know where the door is. Is what he's saying there really any different from what's happening in Nigeria, other than he's not taking up arms?
No, we're just gonna so we're gonna make life totally uncomfortable, if not a living hell, for people around us. And if you don't like it, then get out. Doesn't matter if you lived here your entire life. Get out.
But he says 93% of the country is non-Muslim. So it's just hysteria to be concerned, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing to be worried about. Yeah, so what he's talking about there is you go out to other areas of Great Britain and not a lot of Islam. Islam is basically taking over cities like London, Birmingham, and so on. And the population is exploding there. And so, but there are other areas of Great Britain where you don't have a lot of Islam. So go there. Doesn't matter if you grew up in Birmingham or London your entire life. Get out. Go somewhere else. This is ours now.
When you have a population that practices polygamy, which the British authorities allow, what's gonna look like in another generation or two?
Oh yeah, I mean we've got the statistics, the Pew Research studies and so on, based on a combination of high Muslim birth rates and immigration and so on. Not looking good. I think the projection as of several years ago was that Great Britain would be 17% Muslim by 2050. 17%. Keep in mind when you say 17%, it's not like 17% spread throughout. It'd be like 90% of this city and 85% of that city and stuff, and not much over here in this rural area and so on like that. And if you don't like it, if you don't like the grooming gangs and the jihad attacks and the throwing rocks at churches and so on, you're just a bigot, so you better go somewhere else.
Pretty soon there'll be nowhere else to go. That's ultimately how it ends up. That's what's happening in Nigeria. It's what's happening in continental Europe. It's happening in Britain. Hey, speaking of continental Europe, this is a campaign poster on the left in the picture from the Christian Democratic Union, which is one of the major political parties in Germany. And you see that it is in Arabic. And so, for the first time, a major political party in the West is actually campaigning in Arabic in its own land. It's not like the Christian Democratic Union is going out to Saudi Arabia or Egypt or somewhere to campaign. It's right there in Leipzig. And so that is.
Well, I'm guessing they have something similar there. But I mean, I'm talking way back in the day. This is like 2008 or something. Me and Abil were walking around London, and if you were walking down the street in some of these areas and you didn't know where you were, you would think you were in Saudi Arabia. Because all the signs are in Arabic, all the businesses, all the restaurants, everything you see around you is just Arabic. All the women are walking around; they're in full burqas and so on. So if you just woke up on the street and looked around, you'd say, "Oh man, how did I get to Saudi Arabia?" Same thing with Dearborn. If you go to certain areas in Dearborn and you looked around, you've got the Islamic sermon from the mosque blasting over a loudspeaker. Every sign around you is in Arabic. Everyone around you is in Islamic gear. You'd think you were in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, indeed. I've been in those areas of London. Long time ago, too. And so now it's, I'm sure, much worse. Anyway, that is the show for this week. Thank you very much, David. We hope there'll be no jihad next week because I will be, all things being equals, at this time next week speaking at UCLA. And let's hope not getting beat up or killed, but you never know. And then 2 weeks from today, we hope we'll be back. There will likely be more jihad. Till then, pray, hope, and don't worry.